conservation of matter is this idea that matter can't be created or destroyed. And what that means is all of the matter that's ever existed and is ever going to exist is still here. It just goes round in a great big circle. Bill Bryson said that we have about 1 million atoms from William Shakespeare in us. And before we get too excited by that, 1 million atoms, actually, it isn't enough even to make a brain cell. But it's a lovely idea that we have 1 million atoms of William Shakespeare, Churchill, Genghis Khan. Anyway, all that aside, that idea of 1 million atoms of Shakespeare in us is exactly why we're here. Because Shakespeare was the great playwright, and everybody knows his plays. Measure for Measure, Midsummer Night's Dream, King Lear, Hamlet, and on and on and on. But there are some plays that are lost. And by what I mean by lost is they're known as plays, it's not known whether William Shakespeare wrote them or not. And a really famous one is one called Arden of Faversham. Arden of Faversham is about the murder of a guy in the 1500s, 1550s, and it's been attributed to William Shakespeare, and of course there's a whole host of arguments. Somebody says Thomas Kidd, somebody says Christopher Marlowe, but there's a lot of people saying Shakespeare. Now the curious thing about Arden was he was a real live guy, and this is Arden's house. Arden was born in 1508, and he came here to make his fortune from the dissolution of the monasteries. The dissolution of the monasteries wasn't about Henry grabbing all the gold and silver and selling it off. He also grabbed the land and the buildings, and this stuff was worth money. People pulled those buildings down and rebuilt their own houses from them. Now, I'm guessing on this bit, but Arden was probably not the nicest of guys. He was making his money from the crumbs off the table, but basically the murder of Henry VIII murdering all the monks. Of course, Faversham is old. I mean, lots of places in England are old, but it was a capital of England at one time, and it was also a Cinque Port. Now, a Cinque Port is just a port with special privileges and taxes from the king, and it was a limb of Dover, and it meant it was a really bustling place with lots of things going on. Now, to my mind, there are 4 things that are really worth taking account of. That's beer for the Shepherd Neame, there is the gunpowder they used to make here for all the wars, and there was the shipping of the Puritans out to Massachusetts. They all left from here. Anybody around Massachusetts probably has family right here. And the 4th thing, of course, was the murder of Thomas Arden. Now, Arden's wife, Alice, got himself involved with a guy called Mosby, and they made a couple of really bungling attempts until they had a couple of mercenary soldiers from Calais. And these soldiers were called Black Will and Shakebag. I mean, aren't they awesome names? They're kind of ready-made names for a Shakespeare play. Because, see, these are the Faversham gunpowder works. Now, gunpowder is one of those really curious things that I rank right up there, along with the invention of the wheel and sliced bread. It's an astounding material, and yet really simple to make. It only has 3 ingredients. That's saltpeter, charcoal and sulphur. The saltpeter is potassium nitrate, and that was always the hardest thing to get hold of. The basic way of making it is to collect urine and throw it in a dung heap. You water it every now and then the crystals will actually rise to the top of the dung heap, and you can scrape the crystals off, and that's how saltpeter is made. Of course, the real issue with gunpowder is once you make it, it's gunpowder, so it's going to blow up. You need to separate everything out, and here at Faversham, all of the separate buildings for the stages are put a good distance apart, but of course that doesn't really matter. There's still been some horrendous explosions here. One of them was heard 20 miles away and rose 70 feet into the air, scattering the buildings absolutely everywhere. So gunpowder, cornerstone of Faversham industry, easy to make, but incredibly dangerous. Of course, Faversham's experience of playing with the dangerous and necessary industries like gunpowder isn't only rooted in the past, it also comes to the present day, and we've come here to Cleeve Hill. Cleeve Hill is going to be the site of the UK's greatest solar farm and battery storage system. But obviously there's an issue with battery storage. It is inherently dangerous. There have been 23 fires in South Korea over the last 2 years of battery storage system, and the one in Illinois, of course, burned for 3 days. Now the issue here is that this farm is going to have the TNT equivalent of 1/20th of the Hiroshima bomb. So of course the locals are not that happy by having the equivalent of an atomic bomb sitting in their backyard ready to go off. Despite having worked with gunpowder and having bits of gunpowder buildings blown all over the village for years, rather upset about this one. Anyway, that's enough of the background to Faversham. Let's get back to our main story. Alice and Moseby were perhaps not the brightest tools in the box, and after several bungled attempts at his murder and getting themselves involved with Shakespeare and Black Will, they equally didn't improve what they were doing by very much. But eventually, they did manage to kill the poor guy in a field. And of course, it was snowing. Their hope was that the snow was going to cover the bloody footprints and hide who it was who'd done that murder. But, as luck would have it for them, the snow stopped falling. So this is Fordwich Town Hall stroke old courtroom, and of course it didn't take them long to follow those footprints in the snow back to the house and almost literally capture culprits with blood on their hands. Of course they confessed pretty quickly. Alice actually was burnt at the stake, Moseby was hung, Shakespeare and Black Will ran off back to the continent, and they caught Shakespeare and he was hung in Luxembourg. Black Will was actually never heard from again. Of course, this was an infamous story in the 16th century and everybody knew it, and analysis has shown that certainly the centre section of the play was written by Shakespeare, if not more of it. Anyway, I thought I would share that because I thought it was an interesting story and quite a nice trip around the old town of Faversham, which I believe started in something like the year 911. Now, these are experimental videos and I'm sort of playing with them a little bit, so I do apologise for the sound quality. I really must do something about that if I actually do more of them. But I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Thank you very much for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.